Spite and Malice. Spite and Malice, also known as Cat and Mouse or Screw Your Neighbor, is a traditional card game for 2 or more players. It is a reworking of the late 19th century Continental game Crapette and is a form of competitive solitaire with a number of variations that can be played with 2 or 3 regular decks of cards. It is descended from Russian bank. A commercial variation sold by Hasbro is called Spite and Malice. A variation sold by Mattel is called Skipbo. The game Canasta is also played with multiple decks. 4 decks are used in the game, and it is played with 4 players. Gameplay. The deck consists of 3 regular playing card decks with the jokers removed, or jokers may be retained and used as wild, although the United States Playing Card Company's version of the game uses 2 52 card decks. The rank of the cards is ace lower and proceeding normally up to queen, which is the highest card in the deck. Kings are wild and may substitute for any other card rank except ace. Suits have no bearing on the game. The game is usually played with 2 to 4 players. The object is to be the first person to move all the cards in your go pile into the playing piles. Players cut for the deal, with the highest card winning. Dealer deals 26 cards to each player, or 13 cards if a shorter game is desired. The players do not look at these cards but simply collect them into a pile called the gold pile. Once each gold pile is dealt, the top card is turned over by each player and placed face up on the pile. All undealt cards are left face down in a stack placed central to all players called the draw pile. There are 3 kinds of piles in Spite and Malice gold piles. Each player tries to play through his gold pile. The one doing so first wins. If a player cannot play the card in his gold pile, he may attempt to block someone else from playing. Playing piles. Play piles are community piles used by all players. There are a maximum of 4 playing piles open at any one time. Each playing pile is opened with an ace. Playing proceeds upward in normal rank all the way to the queen. Once a queen is played on a playing pile, that pile is dead and it is removed from the immediate playing area until enough cards are collected to shuffle them and return them to the draw pile. Discard piles. Discard piles belong only to the player who made them. Players may not interfere with or play from one another's discard piles. Each player has a maximum of 4 discard piles. Playing a card into a discard pile ends the player's turn and passes it on to the next player. The cards played into the discard piles must be played out in reverse order of their being laid down. One must remove cards from the top of discard piles when putting them into the playing piles. Players often organize their discard piles by being all of the same number or by descending card ranks so that they may be played sequentially. Players cannot discard an ace. Play. Play starts with the dealer and goes around the table in a clockwise fashion. Each turn starts with the player drawing from the common draw pile to give themselves a 5-card hand. They then make whatever plays they can until they have no more plays that they want to do, and then they discard a card from their hand into their personal discard area, which they must if they have 5 cards in their hand, but if they have 4 or less cards in their hand they don't have to put one out in their personal discard area. If they put all 5 cards out or put the 5th card out on their personal discard area, they pick up 5 more cards and continues. They may only put 1 card out on their personal discard area and may not play a buried card in their personal discard area when they are playing. When they put a card out on their personal discard area and have 1 or more cards left in their hand, their turn is over. The best move would be to play the gold card directly on a playing pile. It would have to be an ace at this point, since all 4 playing piles are empty at this point. If this is not possible, the player may use the cards in their hand to put cards into the playing piles and play up to the value of the gold card. If the player cannot do either of these things, the turn might simply consist of making a discard to one of their 4 discard piles. However, if all 5 cards in the hand can be played in the playing piles, for example, if a player drew a 2, 3, a 2, they could play ace 2, 3 on one playing pile and ace and then 2 on a second pile, resulting in running out of cards before making a discard. That player may draw 5 more playing cards to replenish their hand. It is possible, if not probable, for this to happen more than once, or even a few times in a row before someone is forced to make a discard because they cannot make any further plays. Once a discard is made, the turn moves to the next player. That person starts their turn by drawing cards from the draw pile to make their 5-card hand. On someone's first turn they will always draw 5 cards, but on subsequent turns they will draw however many cards are required. For example, suppose they are able to play 3 cards and then ends their first turn with their discard. On the next turn, they would have 1 card left in their hand and would then draw 4 more to reconstitute a 5-card hand. If a player's only possible move on their first play is to discard because they have no playable card on the playing piles, they would discard 1 card, leaving them with 4, in which case on their next turn they would simply draw 1 card to end up with the standard 5-card hand. No matter how many cards are able to be played, a turn ends with the player placing a card from their hand into one of their discard piles unless they play the winning move of putting their last go card into play, in which case they win and no discard is required. If everyone has a high go card at the start of play, there may be many turns where the players draw just 1 card and then decide which card to add to the discard piles until someone gets a sufficient number of cards saved up in the discard piles of cards to reach their high number. Or one person may end up with a low go card, and in reaching that one and then ending their turn, they will have unavoidably helped someone else to reach their higher number go card. As play continues, many cards can accumulate in the discard piles. In order to make your go card or prevent your opponent from reaching theirs, you can use cards from both your hand and your discard piles during your turn. Scoring. After each hand has ended, scoring takes place. Only the player who cleared the goal pile can score. They score 5 points for clearing the goal pile and 1 point per card left in their opponent's goal piles. If, in the rare instance that the draw pile is exhausted and there is no possible way to furnish a new one, a drawn hand is declared, and the person closest to a clear goal pile scores the difference between their opponent's leftover cards and their own. Games are usually played to 25, 50, or 100 points. Variants. Some rules use unlimited center stacks. They are only removed when the draw stack is depleted. Also, sometimes a rule is employed requiring aces and deuces to be played any time a player is able to do so. Spite and Malice is similar to a game called Misery. It is played with 2 players. 2 decks are used instead of 3 unless 3 people play, then 3 decks are used and 2 gold piles of 12 per player and a hand of 6. Another variation calls for all piles to be built up to the king, with jokers used as wild cards. Wild represents all cards besides a 2, 7 and J. Yet another variant requires a wild card to be immediately covered by the next card, but also does not allow wild cards to be used in place of 7s or queens, because a queen ends the stack and cannot be covered. One variation calls for 1 deck for every player, e.g. 3 players play with 3 decks with a maximum of 4 center stacks to be built from ace to queen, with kings as wilds. Jokers are not used here. Another variation requires a natural and 2 no wild cards for R2, but does permit discarding of pairs of cards, e.g. 2 queens, 2 7s, etc., but no more than 2 cards at a time. Commercial version. The commercial variation sold by Hasbro is called Spite and Malice. Mattel's version is called Skipper. William Henry Story designed a card game starter which was published by Chad Valley in 1935 and which had almost the same rules as Spite and Malice. 2 packs, 44 very dark grey and 52 stop sign red, are used in a game primarily for 2 players, although there were versions for 3 or 4 players. Black cards are divided equally between the players, placed face down with only the top card visible as a stack. 5 red cards are dealt to each player, made up to 5 on each pass, and the rest placed as the draw pack. The aim is to make up to 4 build piles starting at 1 through to 15, using cards from the player's stack where possible. Each player must discard 1 card at the end of each pass except when all cards in the hand have been used on build piles onto 1 of 4 discard piles in front of each player, from which cards may be used strictly top card first in forming build piles. Completed build piles are shuffled into the pack as soon as completed. The first player to use up all of their stack cards is the winner.